Alright, now that we have some of our basic terrain assets set up, let's take a look at adjusting our atmosphere. Now there's several different places that we can do this. First and foremost, and one of the easiest things to do, is go to your terrain pull down to lighting and bring up your lighting tool. Now that should default, forgot to reset some stuff after I played around, that should default to a noon time of day with your sun direction and your equator set at center. Basically, you can decide which direction you want to be east-west, and right now that's fine like that. I like it passed across there. Maybe we adjusted that a lot. We put a little bit of angle on that. And then your North Pole, Equator, South Pole. So where your island is meant to be in the world will affect how the sun passes across it. Now, as we said in earlier videos, I kind of wanted this to be like a North Atlantic, Nova Scotia type island. So I'm going to want to push this towards the North Pole. And you can see how that changes the arc of the daytime sun. And we'll put that, well, let's say 40. Yeah, that works. Now beneath that you have your transitions. Basically you can set what time dawn starts and what time dusk starts, and then how long the duration of that transition is. It defaults at 5:55 and 6:05 with 22-minute transitions. That's all fine. Next, make sure that you have Force Sky Update checked. That way you can see what your changes do in real time. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is the actual time of day dialog. You can find that also under this pull down, or just use this big button here. Now this is where a lot of the stuff really starts to get deep, and we're not going to cover all of it, just a few of the particulars. You have your time of day tasks, in which you can bring in a file, export a file, reset your values, and most importantly, toggle advanced properties. Now typically when I fire mine up, advanced properties is open. I toggled it back to the basic properties, but usually you'll see this. Whichever way it comes up, you can set it how you need it. Most of the things you'll play with are in these basic settings in this dialog. Now, when you start to play around with these, much like the other one, be sure down here that Force Sky Update is checked. Also be sure that up here this red record button is highlighted so that it records your changes. Now let's take a look at some of the things we can change. We can change the color of our sun. We could maybe make it a little orangier. We can go have a look at how that looks. That's pretty good. We can look at our multiplier, and this can go, I believe, 1 up to whatever you want. And we'll try maybe 3, which will basically multiply how dramatic that effect is, and you can see that brighten that up a lot. I like that quite a bit. And then we have the same settings for sky color. We can double click on that and decide where we want that sky color to be and what we want that multiplier to be. And that change is pretty subtle. I don't even know if it'll show up on video here, but it did darken that up just a little bit. And if we kind of look around here, you can see up here towards the center that darkened some. Now next we have fog global density, and this is not the fog you see around your feet or anything like that. We'll play with that later. This is essentially that distant haze and how soon that starts to take effect and how heavy it gets going back. And that's basically another multiplier. So we can come in and let's We're at 0.15, and let's take it away and make it 0 just to show the difference. And that's a typical game engine level that you might see without any atmospherics. It's well, it's very unrealistic. We could bump that up to, say, 0.2, and we get a little bit extra haze in the air, which I kind of like for an ocean environment, so we'll leave that. You don't want to go crazy with that. You will wash out everything really, really fast. Skylight, you can change the intensity of your sun and its multiplier, but honestly I never really mess with that or any of the rest of these. Your sun rays effect, you'll really only be able to tell that. Let's see, where's my sun at? There we go. You'll really only be able to tell that if you're actually looking like through some tree branches or something like that. Give ourselves a little room here. But we could bump that up. That's pretty far. That's not bad, and that's going to give you some pretty strong sun rays. I'm going to leave it at 1.5. I don't need that to be crazy, but you can play around with it. And then color filter I also rarely ever use. Now the other things you can do is you can change your current time of day, see how things look. So say 7 o'clock in the morning. We can see we have our sun coming in from the east. Or maybe we want to do 5 o'clock in the evening. And our sun has moved to the west, and you can see how your shadows fall. It's a good way to look around your level and see, if you have a dynamic sky, what your level is going to look like throughout the day. Or even, if you prefer, say at night. Which I happen to like. I may make this a night level later on. But for now, we'll continue to play in the daylight. Take that back to noon. And that's most of the stuff in here. Now, like I said, you can really get around and play in here, and for all of these effects, you can see how your graph is set up for most everything. So you can play around with moving those points. But honestly, their default sky is one of their best, and their settings are pretty good for it. So unless you're really going for something very stylized or really want to set it for like a permanent night or something like that, you're not going to mess with a lot of the stuff in here. Now, the only other thing I really want to show you is down here towards the bottom in advanced. We have this skybox multiplier, which is usually set to 0. Now, we're going to go look at another tab, and in a moment we're going to come back and we're going to set this to 1 to basically make it active. So let's get out of here for the moment. And now let's come over to our roll-up bar, over to our second tab under terrain, and in environment we're going to look at a few things here. Now there's not a lot of stuff we have to mess with. It's set pretty well, but we have a couple things we can do. First of all, we can change out our skybox, and here under skybox, that's going to require that we change both material and the material low spec. So if we click on there, we will get this little search dialog. And we can look at the different skies we have. And when you come in, you'll probably see this. It's here under Materials, Sky, and then the various skies that we have to mess with. We could look at, we could do evening overcast. And you can either hit apply here, or you can apply it with this little arrow over here, and then also apply it to this one. And apparently that's made no change. That's because we have to go back to our time of day, down to our advanced properties, and change that sky black's multiplier to 1. Not too much change, a little bit more cloudiness, and you can see some artifacting for the actual skybox, and that happens with a few of these, which is one of the reasons that I like the default so much. But we can go in and play around with a few different ones, see what we get. Maybe day 2. Not a lot of difference, a little bit of sun movement, clouds. Now a few of these, you can look up at the sky and it looks pretty good, but one of the things I don't like is it's turned our water surface almost to metal. Now again, if you want something really stylized, maybe you like this look. I don't particularly care for that. Maybe we want to do gray cloudy. And that's a fairly kind of dark, icky day, and this is probably actually not a bad one for a sunny day in the North Atlantic. So in the end, you can do whatever you like. I'm going to take it back to the regular sky, for the moment at least. Maybe later we'll set up one of those nighttime things, something like that. But now you know how to go in there and play around with that. Excuse me. Now, the next thing we need to look at is cloud shadows. Now, in another video, we will be going over how to actually put clouds up in the sky and the different ways that we can do that. But if you want those clouds to seem dynamic here in the ground, you need to set up cloud shadows. And since we're here, we can take a look at this now. So slightly above where we were in cloud shadows, we have cloud shadow texture, and we need to plug in a texture there. So if we click on it, it gives us that dialog again. And if you're in textures, we can go to clouds. And when you're in here, there's a lot of different DDS files for different things. We're really looking for things that say pattern or shadows. And their default one is frankly one of their best unless you're really looking for something dark. So we're going to select that and we're going to open that up. Now the next thing we need to do is go to extend last shadow LODs, and we need to make that 1. And that's all we have to do in the environment tab. However, we do need to hit our tilde key bring up our search. Look at all those errors, me messing around. And we need to search E underscore GSM cast from terrain. So right here. And that we need to be sure that that is set to true, which is 1, 0 would be false. So that's fine. Which is why we were able to see some of this cloud cover. And there we go with me making a mistake. In our console again, in our search, I was calling up the wrong thing. And what we need is E shadows. Need an underscore there. Clouds. So right here. And this you need to make sure is set either from 0 for false, or in the case of you wanting shadows, it needs to be 1. So there, now we got that going. And that'll pretty well set that up for you. If we go down in, and as always, we're going to game test. Oops. And see if we got this shadow floating around here. And we don't seem to have those moving. And the reason was because I forgot to give it a speed. So, cloud shadow speed. We can change this and make it what? Let's try 1000 or 100. We'll try that. I don't need spaces in there. Ooh, that's crazy. Shall we try 0.01? There, that's not bad. There we go. That's pretty respectable. I like that. Alrighty, so that covers the things we really need to play with in here. The only other thing you might look at is your view distance for the fog, but really those presets are pretty good right where they're at. I'm not sure those are something I would mess with even if I got in deep. Last but not least, we'll hit apply just to make sure those are in there. And that'll do it for our first video on atmospherics.